All right, let's take a look at the San Francisco 49ers and see what did they do in the 2018 offseason. What did they do to try to improve their team from last year's season? Well, first, let's take a look and see what their cap situation was like. They had a ton of cap space, almost the most of any team in the NFL, but actually not the most. The Browns had even more cap space than the 49ers did. But you can see what a huge amount, $78 million. And my gosh, they did spend quite a bit of money. They spent more than $40 million of it. But at the same time, they still have $32.8 million left. So they got a ton of cap space to roll over into future years. All right. Or maybe if one of their players goes down and they need to, have a replacement, they'll have money for that. But, they are in a very, very decent cap situation, especially compared to a lot of other teams. So they got $32.8 million. Now, before we start looking at what happened in free agency, I want to talk about the players on their team that I thought at the beginning of the preseason might get cut. Okay, Zane Beadles was one that I thought might get cut. He was a guard who was starting early on in the season, but he got benched because he played so poorly. It saved $3.5 million to get rid of him. He was 31 years old, so they got rid of Zane Beadles. The other guy that I thought might be at risk of being cut was Aldrick Robinson. It would save $2 million by cutting him in the final year of his deal. He's going to turn 30 early this coming season. He averages about 300 yards a season. But the 49ers decided to go ahead and hold on to him. He's more valuable than the cap space, which makes sense given how much money they have available. So now let's take a look. One more. Dakota Watson was another guy that I thought, he would only save $600,000 by cutting him. But you can see he had 8 tackles in 14 games last season. So far they've decided to hold on to Dakota Watson. And he's only averaged like 10 tackles the last 4 seasons. Now let's look at those offensive unrestricted free agents. All right. Just so you know, there's a difference between a restricted free agent and an unrestricted free agent. A restricted free agent, the team in the NFL is eligible to put a second-round tender on them. There's actually 3 tenders. There's like an original round tender, a second-round tender, and a first-round tender. If a team puts a second-round tender on a guy, that means if another team signs him, not only does that team have to pay that player the contract, but they also have to give the other team a second-round pick. So, teams don't like to give up second-round picks because generally you can find a pretty decent player in the second round, and the rookie contract is very, very cheap. And so most teams won't do that. If a guy is like a superstar, you can put a first-round tender on him. You have to pay him a little bit more, but then a team would have to give up a first-round draft pick. So I want to focus on who are the unrestricted free agents on offense. Daniel Kilgore was an unrestricted free agent. They actually signed him. I was shocked because he didn't play all that well last year. And then the 49ers re-signed him for 3 years and $11.78 million. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I was really, really surprised. And then they ended up trading him to Miami, which I think he was upset about, understandably. But nonetheless, that's what happened. So Daniel Kilgore is off to be with the Dolphins. Brandon Fusco is another offensive lineman who was a free agent. He proved to be pretty solid at guard. He was on a 1-year, $1.4 million deal, but the Falcons gave him 3 years and $12.75 million. So the Falcons have the intention of him stepping in as the starter. Last year, they had a guy named Wes Schweitzer who's the starter. Didn't do as well, so they're going to try to bring in Brandon Fusco, but he will not be back with the 49ers. Carlos Hyde, that might be maybe the biggest name free agent on offense. Finished up his rookie contract strong, I felt like. Last 2 seasons, he had 988 yards rushing, and in his past season, he had 940 yards rushing. You can see his yards per carry dropped quite a bit, from 4.6 to 3.9. Also had 350 yards receiving. He's not really like a natural receiver, but still didn't do badly. He had 8 rushing touchdowns. I was a little surprised the 49ers so easily let him walk, but the 49ers just didn't want him. And Kyle Shanahan wanted a guy who, is better at catching the ball out of the backfield, and they let him walk. He ended up getting a deal with Cleveland for 3 years and $15 million. So Carlos Hyde did get paid, and we'll see how he does there in Cleveland, but he won't be back in San Francisco. As far as the defensive unrestricted free agents, Tank Carradine was a backup defensive lineman. Well, he played in 8 games last season. He missed 8 games. I don't know. He was very, very strong against the run. Isn't really a huge pass rusher. He's more of an early down kind of defensive end. Played on a 1-year, $2.65 million contract. Had originally been drafted in the 2nd round in San Francisco, but San Francisco let him walk. Could have brought him back easily. They had so much cap space, but they let him go across the bay over to Oakland, where he signed a 1-year, $1.25 million deal to provide some depth for them. Cassius Marsh was also a free agent defensive end. He started out with New England last year, but they let him go. San Francisco scooped him up, and he did all right. He had 11 tackles in 6 games, had a couple of sacks. He's not bad for a depth player. Provide some, snaps, give the starters some rest. So he was originally a 4th-round pick there in Seattle. He finished up his rookie deal, and San Francisco brought him back for 2 years and $7.7 million. That's quite a decent-sized contract for a guy who has the level of production. I mean, he's had, 3 sacks the last 2 seasons, and he's getting paid about $3.8 million per average. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what kind of role he has this year in San Francisco. At defensive tackle, Leger Douzable was a free agent. He had 19 tackles and 2 sacks last season. He joined midway through the season and played on a 1-year, $900,000 contract. He's very strong against the run, but he's going to be 32 years old. Rotational, kind of a depth player. So far, hasn't been able to find any work and won't be back in San Francisco. Aaron Lynch, that is an interesting name, an interesting loss. Had a 2nd straight disappointing season. Had really good first couple of years in the NFL. Had 6 sacks in each of his first 2 years. Had a great second year. 38 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 7 tackles for a loss. But had a bit of an injury bug. Last year it was a calf injury. But he's missed 18 games over the last 2 years. Tackle numbers obviously down. Sack numbers way down. So he was a 5th rounder, and San Francisco let him go. Chicago was willing to give him a 1-year, $4 million deal based on his early production, but we'll see if he can stay healthy and replicate what he did back in 2015. But it won't be, once again, with the 49ers. It would be with the Bears. Dante Johnson was a starting cornerback there for the 49ers. He played a lot of snaps, but he didn't play very well at the end of the year. And was originally a 4th-round pick, finished up his rookie contract. It seems like the best he could do was a 1-year, $1.3 million deal with Seattle. So, didn't play that well and didn't get paid like he played that well. Leon Hall, 33 years old, definitely at the latter stages of his career, was mainly a reserve cornerback, played some on special teams. Oakland gave him 1 year and $1 million. Eric Reed, that's another interesting name. Played very, very well overall, solid. But the 49ers already have Adrian Colbert that they drafted last year. They have Jaquiski Tart. And Eric Reed, he was involved in that national anthem protest with Colin Kaepernick. I won't even dare discuss it because it's just amazing the level of passion that people have really on both sides of that issue. But so far, Eric Reed has not. But it's not only Eric Reed. It took Trey Boston a long time to find work. It took Kenny Vaccaro. It wasn't until Tennessee lost one of their starting safeties that Kenny Vaccaro found work when Cyprian got injured. And so there's still at least 1 or 2 other really strong safeties out there who haven't been able to find work yet. So it's not only Eric Reed, but he's definitely maybe the biggest name out there. Let's summarize these changes in the San Francisco roster from last season to this season. All right, Carlos Hyde out. You can see those numbers there. Had nearly 1,000 yards rushing. Has had more than 1,000 yards from scrimmage the last 2 seasons. He got 3 years and $15 million, about $5 million a year from Cleveland. Man, San Francisco gave Jerick McKinnon 4 years and $30 million. I'm really shocked at that contract, honestly. I should never doubt Kyle Shanahan because actually I'm a Falcons fan, and his first year was a little rough in Atlanta. His second year was incredible. It was like King Midas. Everything he touched turned to gold. He's an offensive genius. He's an offensive guru. I have no doubt that when he looks at a running back, he knows what it is that he wants. But look at the yards per carry for Jerick McKinnon. 3.4 in 2016, 3.8 in 2017. Now, he was a backup, mind you. He wasn't the starter in Minnesota. But still, I don't know. I know he's going to plan to throw that guy the ball a lot out of the backfield. But here's the question. Why would you pay him 4 years and $30 million unless someone else was willing to pay him around 4 years and $30 million? If another team was only willing to pay him 4 years and $20 million, I highly doubt there was another team willing to pay Jerick McKinnon 4 years and 20, maybe. But who in the world? What other team were they competing against that made them think they had to give him 4 years and $30 million? I don't know. Seemed like not a great contract from my perspective, but I'm sure Kyle Shanahan will make me look stupid, so we'll see. At wide receiver, Dante Pettis was drafted in the 2nd round, so that's a big addition to the 49ers wide receiver core. They brought in Max McCaffrey, but he's only had 1 career reception in 2 seasons. And then Richie James was drafted in the 7th round. So, but Dante Pettis, that's definitely an upgrade at wide receiver. At tight end, Logan Paulson is out. He went to the Falcons. He was primarily a blocking tight end. And Blake Bell is out as well. At tackle, Trenton Brown is out. They traded him to New England. He was entering the final year of his rookie deal, and I guess the 49ers decided to go in a different direction. What was that direction? It was Mike McGlinchey. I'm really interested in what happens with Mike McGlinchey. I'm also a big Notre Dame fan. Mike McGlinchey, I get it, actually, to be honest with you. A lot of people think the 49ers reached. They drafted him too early. But this is one of those situations where if you know you have your man, then maybe you take him. And we'll see. I think Mike McGlinchey is a guy who has gotten better, improved dramatically, and still has a ton of upside to go. So he probably should be a good system fit too, because he's got a lot of athleticism. So I get that. That could be an upgrade there at tackle for the 49ers. Not that Trenton Brown was not good, but Mike McGlinchey could turn out in the long run to be a big improvement. At guard, Brandon Fusco out. He signed with Atlanta as well, like Logan Paulson. So, I don't know if that's just a sheer coincidence because Kyle Shanahan came from Atlanta, but I don't think it is because the two are running similar systems now. The Falcons brought in a new coordinator, but they brought in Steve Sarkisian to basically run Kyle Shanahan's system more or less. Usually an offensive coordinator brings in their system, and all the players change. But in this case, the 49ers brought in Sarkisian because he runs a similar system, and they actually made him learn Kyle Shanahan's system. So I think they went after a couple of Kyle Shanahan's players on purpose. And one of those was Brandon Fusco. He played pretty well last year overall. Zane Beadles, however, played terrible. So how are the 49ers going to try to replace those guys? Well, one, they drafted Jonathan Cooper, who started last year with Dallas. He played all right. They gave him 1 year and $5 million. Now that's interesting. So notice that Fusco signed a deal that was like $4.25 million a year, and the 49ers signed a shorter deal but gave Jonathan Cooper $5 million a year. So I'd be very curious how that negotiation went, with Brandon Fusco's agent. Did they want to bring him back, or did they prefer Jonathan Cooper? Or, how did that whole thing pan out? I'd be curious. And they also brought in Mike Person, who is sort of a swing guard, first kind of guy off the bench there on the interior. At center, Daniel Kilgore is gone. They traded him to Miami after signing him to a 3-year deal. And then they signed Western Richburg to a huge deal, 5 years and $47.5 million. He missed most of last season with the Giants due to a concussion. Now, that rings some alarm bells, but it was his first concussion, I think, in his career, in his life or something. So hopefully that'll be okay. You never want to see these guys get these concussions. But wow, Kyle Shanahan was really, really excited about Weston Richburg. He felt like he was just incredible on tape. He's got the mobility that he looks for in a center, a guy that can get to the second level, super smart, able to make changes at the line of scrimmage. But it's a big contract, man. There's just not a lot of centers getting paid $10 million a year. There just aren't. So that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on. On the defense, Tank Carradine is out. Aaron Lynch is out. Elvis Dumerville also out. Leger Douzable and Dayton Jones. So a lot of players, particularly mainly backup players, out on the defensive end. They brought in Jeremiah Atachu, who I think was a Charger. Yeah, he was. That's an interesting signing. That could work out really well. He had a very strong year in 2015, as you can see, 55 tackles and 6 sacks. But he broke his foot in 2016, was actually inactive for most of 2017. He was buried behind guys like Melvin Ingram, Joey Bosa. So we'll see what kind of year can Atachu have in San Francisco. They gave him 1 year and $3 million. So and they also drafted Kentavious Street in the 4th round. Another important note is that Eric Armstead will be back. He missed half of 2016 with a shoulder injury and more than half of 2017 with a hand injury. He was a first-round pick in 2015. So it'll be important for the 49ers to get Armstead back and healthy. I don't know. They lost a lot of depth there at the defensive end position. You can see Elvis Dumerville's numbers the last couple of years. Not as good as in the past. I mean, shoot, in 2014 he had 17 sacks. Twice in his career he has 17 sacks. Ridiculous. 4 times he had 9.5 or more. 5 times. Just incredible. But now the numbers have been dropping a little bit. He had 48 tackles and 6 sacks in 2015. In 2016, he only played in 8 games, had 11 tackles and 3 sacks. Last year, in 16 games, he had 13 tackles and 6.5 sacks. Was mainly just a pass rusher at that point. And we talked about Aaron Lynch before. So, these are depth guys. That'll be a position to keep your eye on. For the 49ers have talent at defensive end, but can they stay healthy? Can they produce? There's Leger Douzable's numbers. Had a big 2016 in Buffalo. Only played in 5 games last year. It was San Francisco. Had 19 tackles in 5 games. Really good, but did not have a full season there. And Tank Carradine, you can see his numbers as well, and we talked about him earlier. Xavier Cooper and Tony McDaniel were a couple of depth players at defensive tackle. They're out. The 49ers drafted Julian Taylor in the 7th round and then brought in Cedric Thornton and Will Sutton. Not a lot of big-time game changers leaving or coming in at defensive tackle. At linebacker, Ray Armstrong and Navarro Bowman were both let go in the middle of the season last year. And Ray had 54 tackles in just 10 games. And then he was cut in the middle of the year and then signed by the Giants. Then Navarro, I don't know what that was about. And then Navarro Bowman had 38 tackles in just 5 games, and he was cut. Kyle Shanahan's kind of like that, though. He's very, I don't want to call it rash, but maybe a little rash, If he's done with you, he's done with you. He was picked up by Oakland and had a really good season with Oakland, but no one's picked him up so far this offseason. I was surprised at that no one wanted Navarro Bowman. I mean, he's older, but still, he still got some skills. Corey Toomer is in. He had 8 starts in 2017, struggled pretty mightily early in the year, but then recovered later in the season. San Francisco gave him a 1-year, $880,000 deal. They also drafted Fred Warner in the 3rd round. But maybe most importantly, Malcolm Smith is going to be coming back after tearing his ACL. Or actually, I think maybe it was a pectoral muscle. Either way, he had 100 tackles in 2015 and 2016. Had 4 sacks, 10 tackles for a loss, 6 passes defended in 2015, but he missed most of last year, and he was sorely missed by the 49ers. At cornerback, Dante Johnson, who started last season, he will be gone. Leon Hall also gone, and Rashard Robinson also gone. He was traded in the middle of the season to the Jets. Who's in? Boom! Richard Sherman is in. That could be a huge signing if he's able to bounce back from that Achilles tear. And I will never, ever bet against Richard Sherman. I'll tell you that. He negotiated the contract himself. Signed, I think, a very fair deal. 3 years, $27 million, but with a ton of incentives. He gets money for, if he plays on all the games. If he makes the Pro Bowl, he gets a big bonus. If he hits the Pro Bowl, he'll be making closer to like $14 million a season. But his base salary is closer to $9 million. So he's got a lot of incentive to come back strong. And Richard Sherman is just an intensely self-driven person to begin with. So hard to bet against him. Tarvarius Moore, they drafted him in the 3rd round. And they also drafted DJ Reed in the 5th round. So a lot of changes there at corner for the 49ers, but you got to feel like it's an upgrade at that position. Finally, Eric Reed seems to be out in San Francisco, as well as Lorenzo Jerome. Don Jones will be coming back after he tore his ACL in 2017. And the 49ers also drafted Marcel Harris in the 6th round. Overall, when you look at the roster, I feel like on the offensive line, they mostly stayed flat. Maybe I don't know. It's hard to say they dropped off. It's hard to say they got a lot better. At running back, that's going to be an interesting one to watch to compare what Carlos Hyde does versus Jerick McKinnon. But I don't think it'll be a huge change either way. I don't think he's going to get a lot better production than Carlos Hyde did. But he might do a little bit better in Kyle Shanahan's system. At wide receiver, I do think they upgraded at wide receiver. So overall, the big difference, of course, is having Jimmy Garoppolo for the whole year. So, having Jimmy Garoppolo for the whole season, that is a game changer. But other than that, the main position I see that they upgraded from last season is at wide receiver by drafting the guy in the 2nd round. And on the defense, they lost a lot of depth at defensive end. Linebacker, they lost a lot of depth too. But that's what, I think Kyle Shanahan is trying to get guys out that he didn't want anymore and try to bring in his kind of guys. Overall, the big upgrade is having Richard Sherman. So the corners should be improved over last season. If the defensive ends can be healthy, it could be a great year for San Francisco. I tell you, I think San Francisco is one of about 3 teams that has the best shot at the 6th wild card spot. I'll tell you what. Here's how I rank the NFC. I think there's 5 teams that are by far the best teams in the NFC, and those are Minnesota, Philadelphia, Atlanta, New Orleans, and LA, the Rams. I think these 5 teams are by far the best teams. The Rams have a very, very explosive offense. It's going to be very difficult for anybody to stop. And they have an incredible defensive line now with Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh. They got a couple of great corners in Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters. So LA is going to be tough. Eagles won the Super Bowl last year. Did not lose too many key players, maybe other than Patrick Robinson as the nickel corner. Michael Kendricks they let go, but most of that team is intact. They look incredible. The Vikings look unbelievable. They might be the team to beat. I don't know. And then the Falcons and the Saints also look incredible. So, but there's one more wild card spot I think that's available. And the teams that I think have the best shot at it are Green Bay, San Francisco, Dallas maybe, and Carolina. Those 4 teams. Those 4 teams are the teams that are going to be battling for that last playoff spot. I don't think any other team in the league has nearly as good of a chance as these 4. So we'll see if my prediction pans out. If you like this video, please click subscribe. You want to click subscribe because we are going to have some great videos coming up. At the end of the preseason, we are going to break down the final roster of all 32 teams. And then each week we're going to preview the upcoming week's games as well as review the previous week's games. So we are going to have some of the best coverage of the NFL on YouTube. You do not want to miss it. Click subscribe. Thank you so much.